Hello, my name is Russell Lucas and I'm a theatre maker and I interview other theatre makers. So I've just finished speaking with Joseph and I wanted to put him on the channel to talk about the way he handles his career, the way he manages it. He's done things from plays, radio, voiceover, short films, kind of having the dream career in lots of ways. And so we unpack that in the interview. We talk about his little micro skills that he'd fostered over the years. Um, we talk about how when he graduated, some of the jobs weren't falling into his lap, so he had to change his tact. Yeah, really unpacking the maneuvering that an actor may have to adopt when they go into the industry. Enjoy and click to subscribe. Hello, Joseph. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. How are
Yeah,
you?
yeah, good. I'm enjoying the sunlight today, which is very
Yeah. Oh, it's always good when the sun's out.
nice. So thank you for talking to me and to us today. You're going to talk about self-management, in particular, I guess self-management of your career as a performer. Um, but first of all, I always get everybody to tell us about themselves. So maybe tell us some of the work you've done in the past, what type of work you've got coming up in the future. I know currently we're quite frozen with work that's coming up, but what type of things you might want to do.
hmm Okay. So my name's Joseph. I'm an actor. The majority of the things that I've done are theatre, and I started off doing a lot of theatre for young audiences, and more recently I've done a lot of Shakespeare. And alongside that, I've done all sorts of bits and bobs, from short films to R&Ds. Recently, I stepped into the audio world and did a podcast drama, and I also did my first feature film not a little while ago now. But yeah, so I've done lots of bits and pieces, but theatre's been like my main thread.
Okay. And then what type of things do you want to do in the future? I know you've probably got a couple of things lined up, but what type of things do what are the targets, other than the next targets for you?
Yeah, well, in terms of things that I'd like to do, theatre wise, I'd love to do some more new writing, and I'd love to do some physical theatre actually. Love to do that. Maybe step my toe into musical theatre. Um, and outside of theatre, I'd like to do more audio work. I'm really interested in that world, and more screen work as well.
Right.
Definitely, yeah.
You did a new musical, didn't you, at the Other Palace?
Yes, so that was a workshop production. So we rehearsed for a week, and it was whoa. Yeah, putting on a musical, not a play, but a musical in a week was crazy. But it was really good fun, and the audiences responded really well. So it was a workshop production, so people could come and, you know, tickets were sold and people could come and watch it. And the producers and writers were looking for feedback, hoping to develop it into a full-length production in the future.
Yeah, because a week is like nothing.
Oh my gosh, it's yeah. Oh, especially for a musical, because we had dance. I don't know how we did it, honestly. We had dance numbers, as well as songs, as well as scenes, and it was pretty longish. It was, there were two halves to it, um, and on top of that, the director was she had another show on that was opening in the week of our production week. So I don't know how we did it. We were amazing. We were brilliant.
Sometimes those are the best experiences, the ones where you have all of the odds against you and the pressure builds, and they can be wonderful experiences for sure.
Mm.
So you're going to talk to us about self-management. Now, I think that sometimes the skills of self-management can be underestimated in our careers. Um, that kind of entrepreneurship. Those skills can be sometimes lost in the training system. I don't know how often they're addressed. I know there are a couple of students I've spoken to, or a couple of graduates, or a couple of friends, and they say, well, we really get any sort of like term or lesson about how to manage ourselves when we graduate. So I'm interested in talking to you about it because looking at your career, knowing what I know of you, you have a really varied career, which is super interesting. Like you say, you've done stage, you've done some short films, you're doing radio work, you've done commercials. You're kind of like trying everything out, and also you want to do musical theatre now. So,
I haven't done versions yet. Sorry.
so all those things are super interesting to me. That you kind of gone, yeah, let's just do everything and let's see what see what you want to do. So how important do you think self-management is to your career, your self-navigation, your management of yourself?
How important do I think it is? I think it's good for one to know what they want and what makes them tick. And if they do know what that is, they need it fulfilled. And if you don't know what you want, that's absolutely fine. Great, go out and do everything and do the first thing that comes to you and just try everything. But when you know that, oh, I want to do this, oh, I'd like to do that, then you want to move in that direction. And for me personally, I noticed that things didn't come to me upon graduating drama school, and even before drama school, I managed to get some auditions for. I went to like open casting calls and things like that, and I really tried to get out into the world. And I just noticed things just didn't come to me, and so I had to find a way to go to it or go in that direction. And so, yeah, I think it's important to head in a direction if you want to do things, because it won't just happen magically.
So when you say they didn't come to you, do you mean as in they didn't arrive at your feet the way you've been taught they would, or what? What do you mean they didn't come to you? You mean it was harder? What do you mean?
Yeah, I kind of mean it was harder. I feel like when I was in sixth form, or you know, I was like, yeah, I want to do some acting. And you see it on TV, and you're like, great, you go to the audition, you get the job, pow, and then that's it. And it just wasn't always that easy. And then I went to drama school, and then upon leaving drama school, there were things that I felt that I was in the right bracket for, and I just wasn't even getting in the room in the first place. And so certain auditions didn't land on my lap. Certainly certain jobs didn't land on my lap. And things that I felt that I was so right for and I had the skills for, I wouldn't get any audition room for. So those certain jobs just didn't arrive to me, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So then after you kind of assessed that, you said, okay, right, this isn't working this way. What did you do? Because that's self-management. The next step is actually what we're talking about, isn't it? It's like, how did you then readjust and realign your expectations? What went on?
For me, it was having a good sit down of what do I want to do? I want to do X, Y, Z. And speaking really specifically theatre, it would be like I'd want to work with this theatre, that director, those kinds of plays. And then trying to somehow reverse engineer it and find out who the casting directors are for certain things, and obviously seeing the plays and knowing the work, of course. And then whenever I would do a send out, I would go to those specific casting directors and write to them. If there are certain theatre companies or directors, I'd write to them as well if it didn't feel quite so appropriate to go to a casting director, because maybe they don't have an in-house casting system or something like that. And so I would start going in that direction, and sometimes it wasn't always, oh, I'd love, to be in that theatre with that director, but there's something about the work that I really like and enjoy. So one job that I really loved, I saw something at the Royal Court by Theatremakers. It was Belong, and I absolutely loved it. And I was like, co-produced with Theatremakers. I'd love to be involved in this, something like this. And I wrote to them, and I think I got a thank you email, and then that was it. And I didn't hear anything. And then I invited them to a show that I was in, and it was a show that I absolutely loved. brilliant show. It was called Whole by 20 Stories High. I invited them to see that show, and they came to see it, which was amazing. And then nothing happened for about 2 years.
Right.
And then out of the blue, 2 years later, another story. I left my agent, my then agent, and I didn't have an agent. And about a week and a half after I left my agent, they called me up and they said, "Hi, Joseph, you've been on our books for a while. We've got a play that we're producing. Would you like to audition for it?" And I was like, "Yes." And I think I had about 24 hours notice for the audition. I had to do a Zimbabwean accent. I was online all night trying to nail the accent. The director was from Zimbabwe, amazing director and actor, Lucien Mismati, and went to the audition, and I got it. I got the job. But yeah, that was 2-3 years in the making from the point that I saw the show and thought I like this kind of work. Writing to the theatre company, inviting them to a show, and then eventually being invited for an audition. So yeah,
That's that's amazing. It's we'll get to that in a moment because that's a really curious process that you put into place that has ended up paying you back at some point. But I was thinking about what you talked about when you graduated. These things didn't arrive, so you then had to change maybe your expectations or change your approach. Because when I think about when I was younger and my expectation was I just want to work in theatre. That was it. I didn't know how, didn't know where.
yeah,
It was just I just want to work in theatre. I have to be in the theatre. That's the only place I feel at home. And I think you're right. And sometimes the world needs to nudge you sideways or forwards or backwards or whatever for you to go, oh right, okay, maybe that isn't the right area for me. So that's really interesting that you have that instinct to go, right, Joseph, I'm sitting down and I'm going to start to write out my expectations, which then I think nudges your next move to wherever you go now.
yeah.
Maybe.
I think one thing in terms of my expectations was like I was like I'm not being cast in XYZ or this or that or having an audition for that, and I was like, okay, it's not going to happen overnight, so I'm going to have to. My route is going to probably be a bit longer than I thought it would. So I need to, get on their radar. The people who cast those kind of things get on their radar somehow. And so it would mean that I'd be doing jobs and I'd be like, okay, I'm doing this job and I'm enjoying this job for what it is, but hopefully it might lead on to other jobs, which then so-and-so casting directors would come along to watch, or and not expecting that, why don't I have an audition now? Because I would write to them, and nothing would happen. So I'm like, I need to have a show that they want to see. I need to get myself into a show. I need to build up my credits, because I just, yeah. Oh, does that sort of answer your question? Yeah, in terms of I just got the sense that yes, I'm not going to be in XYZ tomorrow, or I'm not going to have an audition for that. I mean, never say never, but that's what was happening.
So if you think about it now, there's definitely a certain drive in that. There is, I mean, it's ambition in some ways, but I think there is actually also a drive behind some of those things that you decided to do. Where does that come from? Where's that been instilled in you? Has that come from a family drive to push you forwards, or do you think that's just plums? I mean, mine is bloody mindedness most of the time. So have you ever thought about that? Where does that drive come from?
Yeah, I find that a hard question to answer, because I'm not 100% sure. I think it comes from a passion for the work. Some of it is I really want to do that, and I'm not going to be satisfied until I do that. So I'm going to put all my energy into getting that. Some of it is, I really enjoy acting. I really enjoy being in this world. So I'm going to do everything I can to keep myself in it. And I think yeah, I think I just have a passion for it, and I enjoy it, and I want to do it, and I know that it's humanly possible to do certain things. I'm like, certain people are having auditions for these things and they're getting the roles, so it's humanly possible. It's within the realms of possibility. So it's humanly possible that I can do those things too. So I want to do them. I want to put all my energy into making sure that XYZ happens, I guess.
I think that's it. That's perfect. It's having, dare I say it, the audacity to say, I want to be in that. I want to do that. I know I can do that. That's a really lovely way of explaining it. Yeah.
Well, yeah, thank you. There is that, and there's also that I know I can do that, which wasn't always there.
Uh,
Um, it really, and in a lot of areas of my life, there's things like I want that, but I can't do that right now, or I think I can do that, but as soon as I get close, I'm like, gosh, I'm not skilled for that. But because I really want it, I'm like, okay, so I'm going to train, or I'm going to learn the skills necessary in order to do that. Even though I know deep down, um, I've got a passion for it. Sometimes there's things that I'm not good at. But if I can't do something, it's like, how can I do this? How can I find a way?
mm.
Um, so it's not always like I can do that. It hasn't always been that, but it's like I really want to do it, so I'll find a way to make it happen.
And the couple of times we've met, we've been to theatre and we've had long chats before. I would say that you're quite a focused person as well, which will also marry with that ambition. Is wonderful. The marriage of that ambition is wonderful. Um, so, in the spirit of what this interview series is about, it's kind of a skill sharing as well as a kind of a just unpacking psychologically of people, a psychological unpacking of people's careers. Um, could you maybe share some things that you think are interesting that you found have worked for you? So, like you say, I mean, you seem to be quite on it about knowing what casting directors are on what jobs. Is there any sort of, like, dare I say it, Joseph fetishes that you do? That's the wrong word. I'm missing are there any particular ways that you run your career? Are there particular tricks that you do that you think might be useful to share with us? So, for instance,
Yeah.
I write my 5 a day sometimes. If I'm stuck in a bit of a rut, I will write down 5 things I need to do tomorrow, and then I do that list. But then if I don't get to it, I then nudge that one to the next day, and that becomes part of the next 5. Just so
Yeah.
just so I have a bit of a structure to where I'm going. So, are there any particular things that you do?
Yeah. Well, I always like to think. I like to try and do something. Especially earlier on, I was like, I want to do something to do with acting on a daily basis. Just something towards it, whether that's seeing a show that day, or whether that's doing a little bit of Googling on someone in the industry, or whether that's compiling a list, but doing something every day towards it. And it can be something really, really small as well. It doesn't have to be very, very active, but being in touch with that world, that was something that I thought a lot about early on. In these days, I kind of, I think I'm a little bit more relaxed about things. And I know that things won't always happen the way that you want them to. And I think if you create your own work, and I'm not talking from experience, but just from observation, if you create your own work, you can really go in a certain direction. But as an actor, who doesn't really create his own work right now, you're at the mercy of the powers that be. And so it's all about what someone once said at drama school: control the controllables. What is in my power that I can control? Writing off to casting directors, not just casting directors, but I've written to artistic directors and theatre companies. And it's not just blanket writing out to them. It's being really strategic about, okay, I've got my list of people that I'd like to work with. When I've got a job that is sort of in the same field as what they do, I will write to them. which is really hard actually, because I've waited years to write to certain people. But I do think the timing is key in that it's worth having something to say when you do get in touch with those people, because, you know, making a first impression, you only make a first impression once. So there's things like that I do. Going to the theatre and supporting friends shows as much as you have time for and as much as you can afford. And also just speaking, hanging out with your friends afterwards as well and getting to know people. I feel like I've done a lot of accidental networking in my time by literally just going to see a friend's show, staying afterwards, and have been introduced to someone. Or I know someone who did a short film, and we weren't that close, but she wrote a short play that I was involved in a short play night of, and she'd done a short film, and I was like, I really like her writing, so I'm going to go to her screening. And I went to the screening, and I went there all by myself. And at this screening, at the end of the screening, there was an announcement for these awards that had taken place. And the award was these writers had written in treatments for scripts. They'd written in scripts. They'd sent over their scripts, and the award was getting funding to produce their script. And I was waiting in line to say congratulations to my friend, because she had so many. And the winner was just walking by, and I just said, "Oh, congratulations!" And she's like, "Thank you. This is so unexpected." I was like, "Oh, well, you must have done something right. Enjoy that." And then we just sort of got talking, and then she was just like, "This might seem really, really weird, but are you an actor?" And I was like, "Yes, I am." She's like, "Well, I've just won this award, and I need young actors in my film. Do you have a card?" And I was like, "Do you know what? I do have a card. Like, I never get it. I'd literally just got the cards out like a week beforehand." And I was like, "Yes, here you go. Here's my first card." And she got in touch with me. And I auditioned for her short film, and I got the part in it. But that connection only happened because I happened to be out supporting a friend, watching their work, and bumping into her and just saying hello, really. So yeah, accidental networking. I don't know if there's anything else. It's probably I probably take it for granted. If there is anything that's really methodical that I do.
I think there's something you just said actually, which is maybe you didn't realize that you said it was timing. That's a real particular thought process, which I was like, oh yeah, actually no, I've done that in the past maybe, but I don't know I've done it. And the fact that you know that you want to contact somebody to maybe work with them at some point, but you have to go, and what you've done is you thought to yourself, I'm not there yet to contact that person. That's a really, really useful skill to know you're either in the pool that they swim in, or whether you're cooked, career-wise, who knows? But that's a real, that's a micro skill.
Yeah, thank you. I think that comes from just realizing, especially early on when I graduated, I was like, I'm great for this, this, and this, but they don't see me like that for whatever reason. So, and it might be because my CV doesn't show to them from the outside, someone who doesn't know me, that I can do X, Y, and Z. Or it might be that the way my agent has marketed me, for example, they don't see me as the person who's sort of right to go into the room. So it's that, for me, it was like marrying up that I know this, but they can't see that. So I need to package my business in a way that they can see that. So yeah, I think it came from there.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I think the idea of the actor being the business, it's dare I say it, that horrible word brand, isn't it? There's the self-management brand of you. It's really key. I spoke to an actor a couple of weeks ago, Robert, and he's a creature performer. And you meet, he's the nicest, most adorable person you've ever met. But when you see him in his creature, you're like, oh my gosh, and he markets himself as this scary creature performer, and he's the most gentlest person I've ever met.
Yeah.
But it's the way that he's responded to the way that the industry sees him, really, which is really great. So just thinking about more about your self-management. Do you ever say no to a job? Because my friend says, a couple of my friends have said actually, that there's a lot of power in saying no. So have you ever said no to a job? And you don't have to name names, but maybe you give an example of if that's happened.
Yeah. So I really like to say yes, and I like to say fully yes to jobs all the time. And I like to go for jobs and see what happens and see where it leads me. But there have been a few instances where I've felt like a job hasn't aligned with what I want to do. And I'm really up for being open about whatever happens. But sometimes there was one scenario where I was like, I've done a lot of this kind of job before, and I don't think I'd get much from doing this again, or doing something so similar again. So in those scenarios, I have actually said no, and it's the scariest thing ever. But I have said no because I've just felt deep down I would prefer to keep myself available for projects that I really, really want to do, than to be in this job that I sort of kind of that I feel like that about. And I've been in a few jobs that I have felt like that about, and I've said to myself, okay, I don't want to put myself in this situation again. I really want to enjoy myself when I'm in a rehearsal room, when I'm performing. So I have done that, and then and there are times, I've said it a few times, less than a handful of times. And it's normally when the job hasn't really aligned with what I want to do. And I've done it and I felt safe enough to have said no, because I felt like I'm not going to gain much from this. And I've done X, Y, Z already. And so I've said no in those scenarios. But I also think, like, once I've, when I talk about sitting down and talking about what I want to do X, Y, Z. And sometimes I want to do W and Q as well. But if something is ABC and it's nowhere near that, then I'm like, I could do that and go for the ride and see where it takes me. But I have done that a few times already. And I'm like, actually, no, I would, there's so many other things that I want to do that I want to make space for that. So yeah, and I have. And I think there's one scenario where I said no. And regret is a very strong word, but I do think about, oh gosh, I wonder what it would have been like if I did say yes. However, that theatre company that I did say no to, they did bring me back in for another audition a few years down the line. So yeah, I think your power to say no is one of the biggest, if not only power, it's not the only power, but it's one of the biggest powers that an actor has. And the power to say yes is very powerful. So, I think it's good to use that and exercise it. And I think my sister said it to me. You can only make a choice to stay if the option to leave is a viable option. She said it much more succinctly and better than that. But, if you're willing to consider, if you can say no and you say yes, then it's much more fruitful.
Yeah, I think I'm kind of the same mind that saying no is perfectly fine, because I think over the years now I've started to trust my instincts more. That I've actually closed that door. My instincts, my self-management will kick in, and I will forge a new way, a new path, a new project will come. I may have to wait a week or two and feel a little bit nervous, but there is a sense of power within you saying, I've actually got more, I've got different expectations of my next step in my career. I've kind of done that. I'm going to go and do this now, or I'm at least going to try and open out to allow it to come in. This other thing I've turned down may come back, or I may get offered it again, or I may get offered it another way. But
Yeah.
the self-management of allowing the new into your career is super interesting.
Yeah. And I think there's been scenarios where I said no really early on when it came to doing lots of student films and short films as well. And I was going up for lots of things, not getting paid or just getting expenses only. And sometimes it was about self-worth. Sometimes it was like, I've read the script and I'm like, whoa, I don't really believe in that. That's really not right for me. And sometimes it was easier to say no in those scenarios. Or, yeah. So yeah, there's some, it depends on the scenario, I guess. But there have been other times where it has been easier to say no and to be like, I'm not about this. And I don't want to put my energy in that kind of work. I mean, there was one time I had a job offer and I really needed to think about it. And it was a prolific theatre and I just told my agent, I just need to think about it. And my agent was like, okay, my agent at the time, okay, how much time do you need? But I needed to sometimes, if it's a big decision, I needed to take the time as well. And it is, you do have the power to say no, and you do have the power to say yes, definitely.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I think even that is just a powerful tip to share today about the power of saying no. So just to extend on some of the other things that you've spoken about today, do you have, I guess what I call, some people say, I've got work tomorrow. I never say that my other stream of finances is my work. I say my theatre is my work. So I sometimes have teaching gigs. And so I will say, I'm off to do my other work. Have you got any other work that you kind of rely on to, keep yourself afloat in your spaces where waiting for other opportunities to come in?
Yes, definitely. Oh my, I mean, I've had extremely long periods of not doing acting work that oh my gosh, yeah. I have. And what I decided early on was I really, acting's always going to be my focus. So what I will do is make sure that I've got work that will work around acting, which is good. And I started off working hospitality and things like that. But oh, pardon me. As I've got older, I've made a commitment to make sure that any of the work that I do get is as flexible as possible, but also pays well and is something that I enjoy. And getting a job that's all of those three things in one is hard, because a lot of the times you might, I was working in hospitality, which I enjoyed, and it was flexible, but the pay wasn't amazing. Or sometimes you can get some jobs that are paid really, really well. You do enjoy them, but you don't really enjoy. They're paid really well. You enjoy them, but they're not very flexible. So I think it's really, really important, especially for graduates, to find something that will keep them alive financially, but keep their soul alive as well. Make sure that they're still enjoying themselves when they're not working in theatre or performance. I think that's so important. And I do lots and lots of different things, from teaching to coaching. I've done landscape gardening, that was fun. But I will try anything and do all sorts of things outside of acting. And I think it's really important because I noticed early on, after graduating, looking around at older actors, I noticed that a lot of actors left the profession because they hadn't reached a certain point after a number of years, and they just weren't earning money from their acting, and they weren't having enough money to do nice things and to get a mortgage or to have kids and have nice holidays. And so I was like, okay, if I can get an income that that is high enough when I'm not acting, it means that I'm not always constantly poor. And it means that I can stay in the acting game for as long as possible, because I'll always be able to live, whether I am or not acting. So I think that's really important. Yeah. And I think I said that in a really long-winded way, but yeah, I think
it's good. It's chiming with everything you've said today as well, because also I would say that if you're going to work in theatre, you have to be in it for the long game. You know, dare I say it, you're living the dream right now, because this is it. This is what it's like.
Yeah.
And then you maneuver around for the rest of your career, however you do. And I think what I've learned from you today is that you have, it's important to have high expectations of yourself and of the industry, and where you fit in the industry as well. I think that's been really super useful. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad that you've learned something from me.
Okay, cool. Fab. Thank you. Goodbye, Joseph.
All right. Take care.